Hi, it's Dre Griggs with Obsidian Wisdom. Today we assess your financial landscape so we can figure out if we're ready to retire. When it comes to retirement, there's a few things that each of us are trying to figure out. I was talking to John, he's turning 60 and he's been a middle manager at a manufacturing company for about the past 35 years. And he is looking forward to retirement, but at the same time, he's wondering, do I have enough money to retire? Will I be able to maintain my retirement lifestyle throughout my entire retirement? And for us to be able to answer this question, there's four things that we need to look at. And I'm going to give you those four things today. And then we'll give a couple of examples of how we can look at it, what adjustments we can make, and anything that we need to do to make sure our retirement is something that we can enjoy, laugh about, and have wonderful, lasting memories of. So, for many people, the last 5 years feels like the make or break time. Are we really going to retire? Should we push our date back? What are the decisions I need to make with Medicare or Social Security? There are so many things that we're trying to figure out. And this is where I believe wisdom comes into play. Wisdom is the insight that we have when we can look back from our experiences and we know the small tweaks that we can make to get the results that we want. As we go through it the first time, maybe even like watching one of your favorite movies, if you watch it the first time, there's small little pieces of information that have been sprinkled throughout the movie that mean nothing to us because it won't become clear until after we've seen the whole movie. I know I've watched many movies, and while I wouldn't necessarily watch many movies multiple times on my own, I have because my kids, as they grow up, they love watching the same movies. And when you watch it over, you realize, they were actually foreshadowing, they were actually telling me about the villain, or maybe they were telling you about something that they went through in the past, or their girlfriend, their boyfriend. There was something that the movie was letting you know about before it even happened. And when I started taking writing classes and I learned it, it's called loading the gun. And the idea is if I load a gun, you expect me to fire it at some point in the movie. Like that's good writing. So if I set something in place, I have to fulfill that. I have to close that loop for you. And so when it comes to you planning for your retirement the first time, wouldn't it be nice to have someone who's already seen the movie once or twice or three times or dozens of times where they can tell you where all the little small pieces are and they can give you those payoffs where it's a more enjoyable experience? Well, that's the purpose of Obsidian Wisdom. We are here to give you that wisdom and insight from multiple people who have gone through retirement and all the lessons that we've learned along the way, all the experiences that we've gathered, all the memories that we've created to where we can share that with you. As small as it may be, it really helps to set your expectation, which makes it much more likely that you'll be able to maintain whatever the plan is. So, the first step of any plan is for us to be able to sit down and see exactly where you're at. You don't want to be given a plan that doesn't even take your own unique personal situation into consideration. And the example that I often give you guys is if you went to a car dealership and then they immediately tried to sell you this minivan and they're telling you all of these features inside of it. They're like, it seats 8 people, it has 30 miles per gallon, it has a 5-star safety rating. And you're thinking, yeah, sure, all of this is nice, but you don't even know what we're looking for. You don't know if I need 8 people. You don't know where I live at, where I'm going to drive it to. You don't know anything about me. You're just recommending this van because the van is nice, right? That would be, in my opinion, someone with a solution looking for a problem. And if the only tool they have is a hammer, everybody looks like a nail. So you start by understanding where your money is at. That would be your current investments, your current savings. This could be your 401k, 403b. It could be your pension. It could be money in a Roth. It could be money in a business. It could be real estate. The money could be anywhere. But we need to know exactly where all the money is so that we have an understanding of how to turn that money into income for the rest of your retirement. And depending on where that money is, it may impact how long that money will last, what order we take the money out in our withdrawal strategy. It comes into play in a lot of different ways. But the first step is to take an inventory of where all of your money is at and what type of accounts they are. Are they pre-tax, after tax? How will they be taxed in my retirement? Because taxes is often that silent killer that I feel a lot of people don't look at. The next thing you want to do is see how much I'm contributing. What percentage of my overall salary is going into each of these accounts so I can see how much I'm actually contributing as a whole. When we're getting very close to retirement, we really should be able to ramp that number up. Where at a minimum, we should consider ourselves trying to get to 20% of our money going towards our retirement fund. If we're not in that 20% range, it may make it difficult for us to be able to maintain our retirement lifestyle throughout. In different cultures, saving is a big thing. I was reading about someone who was Chinese who was talking about in China that 45% of most of their income is saved, that is normal in China. But in America, it's only 5% of our income that is saved because we have a consumption culture. It's seen as being more honorable, more American to support the American economy by spending your money. And we saw that after 9/11, after the Great Depression, after the Great Recession, that the government's like, here's some money, please get started spending. And we even saw that with COVID more recently, that is the way the American society is ingrained in us. It's what's taught to us. It's what's honored and celebrated, where we say keeping up with the Joneses, right? But the Chinese culture is seen as more honorable to save the money than to spend the money. And so you have to recognize the culture that you're growing up in and what is seen as normal, what is encouraged and reinforced over and over and over again. And then you have to take a step back and say, is this beneficial for me? And while it may have been easier if we started earlier, it doesn't mean that it's impossible because we're starting later. So once you take an inventory of all of your investments and savings that will become the income that we'll use in retirement, we then want to calculate our net worth. Our net worth, very simply, is taking all the assets that we have and subtracting all the expenses that we have. And if you subtract your assets from your expenses, that gives you your net worth. Think of your family wealth almost like a business where the money that you have coming in and the money that you have going out, it says something about the health of your company. That also says something about the health of your family enterprise, or it just says something about your retirement. How much money do I need? What is my net worth? What track am I on? Am I a healthy company or am I a less than healthy company? And we just want to be able to see what that is. For most people, your highest asset is going to be your home. If you still have your home, and you probably are getting to a place where you're already close to, if not already paying that off. And then we can look at these different assets to decide if it makes sense for you to do anything different. And we'll talk about that later, where you talk about whether you need to downsize, move to a different state. All these things come into play when you're making that 5-year plan. The next thing that you want to do is identify short-term and long-term financial goals. When it comes to short-term goals, you're normally going to be thinking of things that you want to happen in the next 1 to 2 years. Long-term goals, you're probably thinking in the next 5 to 10 years. And so you want to set these goals so that you can achieve them in the right order. I don't know who to give the credit to, but there's this example of how do you fill the jar up. In the jar, you have this ability to put sand inside of the jar, pebbles inside of the jar, and then like rocks inside of the jar. And depending on the order that you go in, it'll actually decide whether this is an achievable goal or not. And you have to put the large rocks in first, then followed by the pebbles, and then followed by the sand. Because if you put the sand in first, the rocks nor the pebbles would have fit in. But if you put the pebbles in first, then the rocks wouldn't have fit in, but the sand would have fit in. So you have to put the rocks in first. And the rocks in this example is your long-term goals. So for most people, I tell people, hey, we're going to be able to do 3 phenomenal long-term goals. What would those be? If you were able to sit back and say, no regrets, feet up in the air with the thing, those look at the sunset where you feel like everything was accomplished and everything is good, then you would probably say, all right, these are the 3 things that have to be done, Dre. I'm like, cool. Those are the 3 things that we're going to make sure are done. And then based off of those 3 things, all right, what will we need to do in the medium term to achieve that long-term goal? And then we would write those things out. We'd be like, okay, let's set that up. And then we'd say, what will we need to do in the short term to achieve those long-term goals to be able to do that? And as long as we have that base, then we can add the rest of it out. We can fill the rest of it in. Now, I don't want you to feel overwhelmed where you're like, man, Dre, that's a lot of thinking, that's a lot of goals, and that's a lot of planning. But I do want to encourage you to say that you're worth it, right? Like at the end of the day, you are worth it. There are trips that we go on that we put more planning than we do for our own life when it comes to retirement. And I'm saying that we should put the same amount of effort. There are people that I know that go shopping on Amazon and they will look at reviews for hours. They will check all these different websites. They will do all of this due diligence to have a solid plan so that they have no regrets about their purchase. But I'm sitting here saying, we're about to purchase your freedom, right? We're about to purchase your freedom. What do you want to make sure that we have all the pieces in place to make sure that that is one of the most enjoyable experiences of your life? And I would say, yes, like we should do that. And once you have a short, medium, and long-term goals, it then becomes my job or your job if you're doing it alone to align your finances to those goals. And while it is fun to say, peace of mind is priceless or different things are priceless, the truth is they all have a price to it. And if we assign that number, then we know whether we can actually do it or not. Right. I agree that peace of mind is very valuable and it's something that we should do everything we can to purchase. But sometimes the dollar amount of peace of mind makes it more sense for us to focus on the understanding. So I'll give you a quick example. If you were someone who needed $10,000 to buy your dream home, but you needed that money in a relatively quick manner, like we're not going to say you had to go rob a bank with a ski mask, but we're going to say you needed it in kind of a quick manner. Well, you may not be comfortable with the investment strategy that I put together. And so for your peace of mind, I may change that strategy to something that's more conservative, more safe. But at the same time, it may have made more sense to educate you on why this strategy works, why this strategy is safe, and why this does make sense. because sometimes we don't have enough of an understanding. We haven't gained enough wisdom, insight, and clarity that we end up making decisions that bring us peace of mind, but at a really expensive cost. There are people I talk to where their parents lost all of their money in the stock market, or they lost all their money in real estate, or they lost all their money opening up their own business. And so their children have sworn off these assets. They said, I will never invest in those. Well, naturally, you can see as a financial planner that that would make it very difficult for me to find a place to put your money to be able to grow so you can achieve that goal in the time frame that you need. And while investing all of your money in a money market account would give you peace of mind, it might make more sense for me to walk you through the process of how to choose the right real estate business or investments. And so for me, that's where the wisdom comes in. Most things, there is a time where it makes sense to be able to do that, right? Like murdering someone would be wrong, but if someone died in your self-defense, well, that would make sense and that would be okay, right? The ultimately is the same result, but the circumstances have changed it. Having children is a great thing, but we probably don't want our teenagers to have children. The circumstances of the age change whether it makes sense to be able to do that. And so for most things, it's the circumstances around the situation that decides when it makes sense for us to be able to do it. The third thing you want to look at is the quick fixes and adjustments for an immediate impact. So, when it comes to planning your retirement at this particular point in time, you already have the information that you need to know whether or not you're on track to retire. We know what your net worth is, we know where all your assets are, we know what your expenses are, we know what your short, medium, and long term goals are. So, we already have that set up. And when you look at these two things and put them together, the goals and the cost of my retirement lifestyle, and then the money that I have invested and saved, I know whether there's a gap. And if there is a gap where you don't have enough money for the lifestyle that you're desiring, we then have to look at quick fixes. So normally when it comes to these quick fixes, you normally have three levers that you can access. The first one is I can increase the amount of money that I'm putting towards my investments. And all that is we're having a little bit more of a long-term approach to our retirement, where the way I've heard it described and the one that stuck with me the most, and forgive me if it's something that doesn't resonate with you, but it did resonate with me, is I remember reading the story about this slave back in the day, and he was able to purchase his freedom. He did a certain amount of work each day, and then he was able to kind of do something on the side. He was able to access this extra money. And this little bit of money he would put away each day for a period of maybe 4 years. And he was able to purchase his freedom after 4 years. But he also had a brother who worked at the same plantation, and he didn't want to just purchase his own freedom. So he worked an additional 4 years so that he could purchase his and his brother's freedom at the same time. Now, you may be thinking, well, Dre, why didn't his brother just do what he was doing so they both could have purchased their freedom after 4 years instead of the one brother working 8 years? And the truth is, I don't know. Some people are savers and some people are spenders, is kind of the way I would think of it, but I don't want to overthink it. But the idea is purchasing my freedom as a goal is a pretty big goal, but it's a very beneficial goal. Culturally, I tend to find that we actually spend a significant amount of money on semblances of freedom, things that make us feel like we're free, but we never actually bought our freedom. So we get the nice cars and the houses, we take the trips, we do all these amazing things, but we've never actually purchased our freedom. Where the hole that we're feeling, or at least the hole that I was feeling, was because I had never purchased my freedom. And while I put all these things around me, you very quickly realize that that feeling doesn't go away. And if it does go away, maybe for a week or two, and then you're like, man, it didn't really go away. And for some people, that's Monday, where there are studies that say Monday is like the worst day of the week for a lot of people because they feel like they've sold themselves and they have to go back to work. They have to go back to that situation that they don't like. Now, if that's not you, God bless you. Obviously, that's fantastic. But for the majority of people, Monday has been recorded as the worst day of the week for people, and Friday has been recorded as the best day of the week. And you don't need to be a rocket scientist to know that the number one reason that those people don't enjoy Mondays and enjoy Fridays is because of the freedom that they lose on Monday and then the freedom that they gain on Friday, or at least the feeling of freedom that they gain on Friday. And so for you to achieve your retirement goal and purchase all of your time back so that you no longer have to work if you don't want to, that is going to be something that is relatively expensive. It's probably going to be the number one expense that you have paid, and it requires multiple years of saving to be able to achieve that. But it may, in these last 5 years, require us to put 50% of our salary towards it. If that's something that you're excited about, if that's something that you can do, then we can do that. The second lever is going to be lowering your expenses. So there's a variety of ways to do this. And one of them, we could say, all right, let's move to a lower cost of living state. Let's move to a lower cost of living country. Let's downsize our house, move into some sort of a community. There may be a variety of ways that you can lower your expenses, but any one of those would be okay. Maybe you're going to take a trip every quarter. Maybe you're going to join a golf club that costs $40,000 a year as far as the membership. Maybe you could join a golf club that costs $25,000 a year. Maybe you could take a trip twice a year or once a year. There are ways that you can adjust your overall expenses to be able to achieve the goal. You also could focus the money on lowering some of your debt, and that would also have the same impact. So the plan currently had you going into retirement with a car payment or a mortgage payment or a credit card payment. Maybe we can allocate 20% of your money towards getting rid of that debt. Once you get rid of that debt, it then frees your money up to work more efficiently. You don't have the same expenses. We don't have the same break even point as far as maintaining that business analogy where there's a certain amount of money that you have to make each month in your corporation to be able to break even just to keep the lights on. And then everything after that would be maybe considered as your profit and your variable costs, things like that. Well, your retirement is the same way. You have certain fixed costs, things that are going to happen if you just sat in your bed all day and did nothing. These are your fixed costs. And then your variable costs will be things like, am I eating out this week? Am I going to restaurants? Am I taking my trip this month? These are variable costs. These can change. You may take a trip this month. You may eat out 3 times this week. You may eat out 0 times next week. It's a variable cost. So whatever your fixed costs are, which is normally going to be like your mortgage and your car payments, these minimum payments, if you get rid of your fixed cost, it lowers your break even point. And now you don't need as much money to maintain your lifestyle in retirement. And the third quick fix is your time. If you're in a position where you love the work that you do, you make a great amount of money, then maybe just working an additional year or two would have a significant impact on your retirement. And this is multifaceted. One is you don't have to take your Social Security as early. You're still working, so you're maintaining your money. And your Social Security, generally speaking, is going to increase by 8% every single year. So you will increase the amount of money that you get from Social Security, which then increases the amount of income that you receive in retirement. Another benefit of working an additional year or two is you're not withdrawing money from your investments. Now that money has another year to grow, and you're increasing the amount of money in those accounts. You're actually investing more, contributing more, and you're not withdrawing or taking anything out. And you find that that actually has a significant and profound impact. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars can be made just by you working an additional year where you're not withdrawing the money out and you're putting money in. Another benefit of working an additional year or two is now you can allocate even more of your money towards those expenses that we talked about getting rid of. If you were going to retire and your retirement lifestyle was, I don't know, $40,000, $50,000, $80,000 a year, well, now you can sit there and say, okay, well, I was only going to live off of that amount. So let me just kind of live off of that amount. And then I'll put the rest of my money towards my expenses. And I can get rid of my expenses in the first year. And then I can allocate more money towards my investments the second year. Or I could just get rid of all my expenses because that's all I needed to do. And once I did that, I could then retire, where it may not even be an additional year. It may just be an additional few months. For others, if the work you do is pretty stressful and it's something you want to take a step back from completely, then maybe finding part-time work that isn't stressful and it's something that you enjoy doing, something that brings you fulfillment, and you get paid something, but the amount of money that you get paid isn't as important as maybe the fact that there's healthcare that's offered through that. So that is an expense that you don't have to start, or the fact that you don't have to access your Social Security. So that is something that you also don't have to access, or you don't have to go into your investment. That's something that you don't have to access. And because of that, you now are able to prolong going into all of these other funds, which allows those funds to keep growing, which increases significantly your opportunity to succeed in retirement. These are all quick fixes that when you're 5 years out from retirement make a lot of sense to be able to look at. The fourth and final thing on our list is you want to evaluate risk tolerance and investment strategies. We don't have to look very far back to realize why this is one of the most important things that you can do when it comes to preparing yourself for retirement. When you look at the impact of the Great Recession, people lost upwards of 60% of their investments, where they had $1 million set in their investment account. They're about to retire in the next 3 to 5 years. And then they all of a sudden were down to $400,000. They lost 60% of their portfolio. And if you're evaluating your risk tolerance and investment strategy, the idea is if I'm 3 to 5 years from retirement, if I'm in the single digits for my retirement date, then I probably shouldn't be overly exposed in the stock market, or at least I should have some sort of a hedge where I don't lose 60%. Maybe I lost 20% because of the way my portfolio was designed, or maybe I lost even less than that. But you want to have some sort of a plan in place that as you get closer to retirement, the way I would describe it is you start locking in some of your gains. Where we have this money in the stock market and it's growing or it's not growing, but that money's not quite real yet. We haven't taken the money out of the stock market and allocate it to something maybe a little more real. And this becomes a very important part of your retirement strategy, that if you're going to retire in the next 5 years, it is true that the stock market tends to go up over time, but it's also true that there are some nasty years in there. And because of that reality, if you don't have what I would consider a long-term approach, then you can't be overly invested, overly committed to the stock market. And for me, a long-term approach is going to be money that I'm confident I can leave in the stock market for at least 5 years. If I can leave my money in the stock market for 5 years, then I know that I have a long-term approach. I have a reasonable opportunity to make back any of the losses that I endured. But if I only have 1, 2, 3 years, then I'm really gambling. I'm not investing because any one of those years could be a bad year. And if your money is invested in the stock market in a quote bad year and you lose 60% of your portfolio, like we talked about in the Great Recession, well, you're probably not going to be able to retire as you originally planned. You can't retire in a year or two when you lost 60% of your portfolio. You may have to now work a little bit longer. And the thought that a lot of people have is, Dre, there is a gap between where I'm at and where I need to be. And I did the math and I just need to have a 30% return over the next 5 years and I can achieve all of my retirement goals. And while that is true, when you actually take a step back and look at the portfolio that is designed to give you a 30% return, what percentage of the time does it give you a 30% return? And I've done another video where I'll put a link to it where we talk about some portfolio designs and how to see what the probability of it achieving that is. And sure, you may achieve that 30%, let's say 20% of the time, and you would say, yeah, okay, that's fine, 1 in 5% chance. And you may have a positive return in your portfolio maybe 60% of the time, but 40% of the time, you're going to have a loss. And within that 40%, 15% of the time, you may have a big loss. And we can't quite deal with those big losses when we're within 5 years of retirement, which is why there are some expensive funds out there like a target date fund where they just do those adjustments for you, but you could do it for yourself and save a significant amount of money from the expense of a target date fund. The general rule of thumb, and it's not that you have to follow it exactly, but there's a lot of ways to do it. I've heard it where the idea is as you get older, whatever your age is, you should put that amount inside of something that's safe, something that's more real. And we're normally talking about bonds and treasuries and other relatively safe investments where you can move the money from the stock market and equities to where it's a little bit safer in bonds. And you would normally say, well, whatever the year is that I am, so if I'm 40 years old, then 40% of my portfolio could be in bonds. If I'm 60 years old, then 60% of my portfolio could be in bonds, where you can see you're moving more and more of your money into safe investments as you get closer to retirement. Now, this is not a slam dunk 100% of the time rule. And what I'm saying is when you're 80 years old, you probably shouldn't have 80% of your investments allocated towards something that's safe because you're probably not going to keep up with inflation. But it is giving you the overall framework to think about your investments where you're thinking, yes, more of my investments should be allocated towards something more safe, more permanent, where I'm protecting the amount of money that I have, where I'm shifting from the accumulation phase, the growth phase, into the asset preservation phase and the spending phase, where those are different goals with a different strategy that you can use to achieve them. But all of this starts with your risk tolerance. There is no reason for you to have an investment strategy that doesn't align with your risk tolerance, because what's going to happen is whenever the market goes down, if you're someone who avoids risk, you're naturally going to want to sell all your stocks as they go down, which is the definition of you selling low and buying high, which sounds like something that won't work. And you were correct. That will not work. And that's why we have to have an investment strategy that makes sense for you, where it's designed in a way that helps you accomplish all of your financial goals, but it's also designed in a way that helps you sleep comfortably at night, where you're not waking up and checking your stock market every morning because you're like, I can't deal with this stress and this anxiety, or you're not calling me every other day because you're looking at it, you're like, Dre, what's going on? Because I can't deal with that stress and anxiety either. And so it makes sense for us to be able to put the plan together in a way that you can maintain it, achieve your goals, and keep that peace of mind. As always, I'm thankful for your time. I appreciate you giving it to me, sitting with me, listening to me, discussing this retirement landscape, and we were able to put a plan together to help you achieve your goal. If you're someone who's 5 years from retirement and you don't want to be worried about it and you want to be happy about it, go to obsidianwisdom.com/wealthy to learn more. Until next time, stay safe and enjoy life.